After breaking up, I encountered my ex-girlfriend, who had become a wealthy lady, in the elevator. She looked at the child I was holding in my arms and for the first time, she seemed flustered. But what came to mind for me was back then, when I saw her attending a banquet with a famous actor, enjoying each other's company. At that time, I was filled with self-doubt, unable to muster the courage to even suggest a breakup. Several years later, I was invited back to my home country. However, she stood in my way with teary eyes. "Don't hide from me. Say that you can't let go of me. Say that you regret every day since the breakup. Say that you have only loved me in your entire life. As long as you say it, I can give you anything." Chapter 1. When I saw Cathy again, summer had just passed. On my sister's 31st birthday, her husband booked a hotel to celebrate. I entered the elevator carrying my niece. In a moment of distraction, the little girl pointed at a poster inside the elevator, her face filled with curiosity. "Uncle, this lady is so pretty." I looked at the woman on the poster and couldn't help but be taken aback. It was Cathy. I heard that she had been extremely successful in these past few years, with her business expanding globally. My niece seemed very interested in her, pointing at the name on the poster and continuing to ask, "Uncle, what does this word mean?" I fell silent for a moment, feeling a tremor in my chest. The sieve of memories sifted through countless past experiences. The elevator door chimed open, and I heard my own voice. "The seeing Cathy." My niece giggled. Beside me, I heard a calm and pleasant female voice. "Did the gentleman just mention me?" That voice. I looked up and met Cathy's peach blossom eyes perfectly. Time seemed to stand still for a few seconds. Cathy stared at me intently, as if in disbelief. Soon, she regained her former cool and composure. I never expected that after all these years, we would meet in such circumstances. Cathy tugged at her lips, her smile pale. "Lance, long time no see." I nodded. At this point, I didn't even have the courage to say a word to her. Fortunately, the elevator stopped at the floor I wanted. I practically rushed out of the door with my niece in my arms. From behind, I heard the woman's urgent voice. Do you have a child?" I was about to answer, but my niece next to me spoke first. "Auntie, this is my uncle. Handsome, right? He's not married, still single till now." I let out a heavy sigh, feeling a sharp pain in my heart. Under Cathy's fiery gaze, I ultimately escaped. Chapter 2. More than half of the banquet had passed, and I stepped outside to get some fresh air. I took a deep drag from my cigarette and exhaled a beautiful white smoke ring. Leaning against the window, I quietly watched the bustling traffic below. These past few years have been quite turbulent for me. During my most destitute times, I had to split every penny in half. Fortunately, now I have finally weathered the storm and can see the moon through the clouds. The atmosphere was calm. The footsteps approaching me carried a sense of restraint. I looked up and saw Cathy standing a few meters away from me. She looked at me with her hands in her pockets, her dark eyes inscrutable. "Long time no see, have you learned to smoke these things? You never had these bad habits before." She was always someone who could never be fully understood. I lowered my gaze and expertly extinguished the cigarette in my hand. Is CEO Cathy here just to catch me indulging in this little vice? I lifted my foot, and my shoes made a clattering sound on the empty ground. It felt a bit grating. Each step struck my heart. When I reached Cathy's side, she suddenly grabbed my arm. Her breathing became erratic. "Lance, don't you have anything to say to me?" Cathy's voice carried eagerness, even a hint of submission. Only then did I lift my eyes and meet Cathy's slightly reddened eyes. What else is there to discuss between exes? Rekindling old memories, reigniting past feelings? "Lance, don't let your guard down. You can like anyone now, except for Cathy." I kept reminding myself in my heart. A good horse doesn't go back to eat old grass. Cathy narrowed her eyes and counter-questioned. "Where have you been all these years? I've been trying to find your whereabouts, but there has been no trace." I scoffed lightly. "Why are you looking for me?" In my eyes, my departure was no different from losing a cat to Cathy. Today, she pities me and feeds me more cat food. Tomorrow, if she likes someone else, I'll go hungry. I'm just a pet that Cathy keeps. Seeing my indifferent expression, Cathy stared at me intently, as if trying to read my mind. "Lance, you truly are ruthless. You left without saying anything, how dare you?" Chapter 3. During university, I was in a relationship with Cathy. At that time, I was still a student, while she had already taken over her family's large enterprise. Cathy had a wide social circle, mostly consisting of wealthy second-generation individuals. As a young person from a small county, I felt out of place in her social circle. She was considerate, taking care of all the little things in our relationship. While most people our age were worrying about language exams and major courses, Cathy showed me a much broader world. Rowing in London, visiting exhibitions in Paris, speeding on American highways during sunset. The expenses in Rome were extravagant, surpassing what an average family would spend in a year in just one night. Undoubtedly, Cathy was a suitable partner. For me, however, I was constantly exposed to a world that wasn't my own. The class difference between Cathy and me was too great. And this relationship was destined to be unequal between us. I couldn't message my girlfriend anytime and anywhere like regular couples. Because she was busy with work, I was afraid of disturbing her. When going out together, her friends never bothered to ask for my name. It was as if they assumed I was just a handsome canary that Cathy took care of. I knew that in this relationship, I would always be beneath her. And Cathy held the power in this relationship. Until later, I witnessed a famous actor embracing Cathy at a dinner party. They looked perfect together. Unlike me. Chapter 4. It's not so much jealousy as it is a feeling of inferiority. That overwhelming sense of inferiority struck me down completely. I despised myself for not being able to fit into Cathy's circle, for not being outstanding enough. Because of this, I couldn't stay by her side even more. With her around, I would always feel like I had a crutch to rely on. So, on an ordinary night, I quietly moved out of the apartment Cathy had bought for me. No breakup, no goodbyes. I broke the SIM card, cutting off all means of communication. I thought that when we meet again, I will have achieved enough excellence to match Cathy. What I wanted was visible respect. In those years, I moved to a different city. I worked hard and faced a life of extreme poverty. Many years later, I became a senior jewelry designer. I was hired back with a high salary and settled down in this city. I know that my decision was selfish from Cathy's perspective. But that's not what I wanted. Even if we had forced ourselves to stay together at that time, we wouldn't have been happy in the future. Chapter 5. Detaching myself from the memories, I looked at Cathy. She appeared more mature than she did a few years ago. I let out a sigh of relief. In these past few years, my mindset has changed drastically. I weigh the pros and cons and think things through more. Just like now. There is a sense of unfamiliarity and indifference between Cathy and me after being apart for so many years. She is fixated on the person I was in college. Like a moonlight, deeply engraved in her heart. But that feeling is something I can no longer provide. I looked at Cathy and sighed softly. I know, I left too hastily back then. Cathy, we were never meant to be together. All the attachments you have now mean nothing to me. I turned to walk away. But Cathy refused to let go. She pulled me into the staircase, her feminine figure pressing against me. In the midst of chaos, Cathy cornered me. I became annoyed and embarrassed. Let go. Cathy pressed her red eyes against mine, stubbornly refusing to release her grip. I won't let go. I've let go once, and this time, no matter what you say, I won't let you go. Before I had a chance to think, she aggressively kissed me. The more I struggled, the tighter she held me. In the midst of our breathlessness, she buried her head in my chest. Salty tears streamed down onto me. She was crying. This was the first time Cathy shed tears in front of me. In the quiet and confined space, Cathy's voice trembled with sobs. Don't hide from me. Lance, say that you can't let go of me. Say that you regret every day since the breakup. Say that you've only ever loved me in your entire life. If you say it, I'll give you anything. In the heavy atmosphere, I couldn't utter a single word. It wasn't until today that I finally understood. Cathy, she also has moments of emotional turmoil. But now, her loss of control may not necessarily be because of me. Perhaps her own emotional struggles, or perhaps her lingering resentment towards me over the years. But she already has someone else, so why does she continue to entangle herself with me? I lowered my gaze and gently pushed her away. If I say it, will you believe me? In that moment of eye contact, I saw the light in Cathy's eyes gradually extinguish. Chapter 6. Coming out of the staircase, my sister was searching for me everywhere. Seeing my unusual expression, she asked with concern. What's wrong? I smiled and shook my head. Just needed some fresh air. Let's go back. My sister looked at me somewhat suspiciously. Lucy told me that Uncle ran into a beautiful woman in the elevator today. Lance, do you know that woman? She was my girlfriend in college. A hint of surprise flashed in my sister's eyes. I've been advising you all these years to give those younger girls around you a chance to pursue you. But you've always refused. Is it because of her? I shook my head, feeling a bit complicated. Sis, it's not. Seeing that I still had some unresolved feelings, my sister didn't say anything more. She smiled and held my hand. I'm already married and have children, so naturally, I want someone to take care of you. But more than anything, I want you to be happy. As long as you're happy, it doesn't matter if you never get married in this lifetime. She gave me a comforting look. Indeed, over the years, there have been many women around me. Those women were attentive, beautiful, intelligent, elegant, gentle, and considerate. Yet, I no longer have the courage to start a new relationship with someone else. The problem lies within me. I have gradually lost the ability to love. Chapter 7. On Monday morning, my assistant stood in my office to report on the daily tasks. I was immersed in designing sketches, multitasking to some extent. After finishing the work, there was a noticeable pause in my assistant's tone. Lance, a woman came looking for you just now, and she's quite beautiful. I paused my pen and looked at my assistant. Did she leave a name? No, she just insisted on seeing you. I glanced at my watch and nodded. Let her go to the conference room, I'll be there shortly. It wasn't until I opened the door to the conference room that I understood why she insisted on seeing me. Cathy was wearing a black cocktail dress today, looking more approachable than usual. As I walked in, her dark eyes flickered. From the moment I entered until I sat down, her gaze never left me. President Cathy is truly efficient, finding my studio so quickly. I smirked and looked at the woman sitting across from me. Though she sensed the irony in my words, Cathy clearly didn't take it to heart. Lance, I've come to seek your collaboration today. I looked at her in silence. I want you to help me design an engagement ring. The woman's dark eyes were cold and captivating, with an inexplicable allure. I pursed my lips and took a sip of the coffee on my desk. Money doesn't grow on trees. Especially when it's someone like Cathy, a capitalist. Based on professional ethics, I still asked a question. May I ask the purpose of this engagement ring? A lazy smile curled up at the corner of Cathy's lips. For marriage. As Cathy spoke those words, her gaze softened even more, a tenderness I had never seen before. The coffee in the cup accidentally spilled, and I hastily pulled back my hand. Is the groom-to-be that famous actor? Indeed, such a grand gesture. Only a custom-designed diamond ring can match his status. Cathy looked at me meaningfully. Having difficulties, I see? Not at all. Suppressing the bitterness in my heart, I looked at Cathy. If President Cathy has any specific requirements, you can discuss them with my assistant in detail. I will confirm the design with you using the sketches. The woman raised an eyebrow, not giving me any chance. Just communicate directly with you. My boyfriend can be difficult. If he's not satisfied with the design, I'll be the one to suffer, won't I? Seeing that I still wanted to refuse, Cathy upped the stakes. Lance, we've known each other for a while now. Can't you help me with this small favor? With those words, she glanced at the colleagues outside the conference room. The threat in her tone was evident. Fine, she won. I didn't want to make our relationship public knowledge. As I took out my phone to add her on WeChat, Cathy's lips curled up into a pleased smile. Chapter 8. After obtaining my contact information, Cathy surprisingly remained quiet. She never sent me a single WeChat message or inquired about the progress of the design sketches. I was actually quite satisfied with this situation. It saved me from being in a state of panic every time we met. But fate sometimes loves to play tricks. I never expected that after so many years, I would encounter that famous actor once again. As I returned home, he was coming out from the apartment opposite mine. He seemed hurried, and we collided at the elevator entrance. Lance? The man's voice called me with a hint of surprise. I turned around, internally shocked. He actually knew my name? He seemed to bear no ill will towards me, and his slender fingers tentatively pointed towards my apartment. Do you live here? I nodded. Yes, I just bought this house recently. He seemed to understand something, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. Oh, I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Cathy's brother, and my name is Bill. Brother? Bill shook my hand in a friendly manner. So, he was the person who attended the dinner with Cathy at that time. He's her actual brother? I was wondering why this girl suddenly wanted to buy a house here. Turns out it's because of you. Bill chuckled meaningfully. If it's convenient, may I come in and sit at your place? Oh, sure, of course. Caught off guard by the impact, I belatedly invited Bill inside. Would you like something to drink? Just plain water is fine. I smiled at Bill. He looked neat and clean, subtly assessing me from the moment he entered, his gaze filled with curiosity and a touch of gentleness. Aren't you curious about how I know your name? Sitting across from each other on the sofa, I quietly lowered my gaze. It must be related to Cathy. After taking a sip of water, Bill furrowed his brows and looked at me. It was after you two separated that I found out about your existence. At that time, my sister was desperately searching for your whereabouts, as if she wanted to dig 3 feet underground. But the results were not as expected. You might not believe it, but Cathy, who has always been indifferent, was like this for the first time because of a man. I told her that maybe you had your own reasons, and if it's meant to be, you will meet again. Later, she searched for you for almost half a year. As she gradually lost hope, I helplessly watched her deteriorate. Until one day, when I went to see her, I don't think I'll ever forget that scene in my life. She was lying in the bathtub, with a deep cut on her wrist. With a loud bang, my mind went blank. Cathy. She actually tried to commit suicide because of me. As Bill continued, he couldn't hold back his tears any longer. I felt a chill running down my spine, and my whole body seemed to freeze. Bill covered his face and cried, choking as he spoke. I panicked at that moment and quickly called an ambulance. During those few hours outside the operating room, I considered countless possibilities. Fortunately, she was eventually saved. After Cathy woke up, she was filled with despair. The first thing she asked me was why I saved her. Lance, my once vibrant sister, was ultimately destroyed. Tears streamed down his face, growing more and more intense. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I never knew all of this. I have let her down. Bill gradually calmed down. He wiped away his tears, smiled, and shook his head at me. Don't blame yourself. It's my sister's stubbornness. Once she sets her mind on someone, it's always that person. Don't be fooled by her usually reserved nature. She truly loved you to the core. Now that you're back, regardless of whether you can reconcile or not, I hope you can resolve the misunderstandings from before. Bill stood up and patted my shoulder. I looked at him and saw encouragement in his eyes. As if telling me that it's okay. A strong sense of guilt filled my mind. I think I need some time to process everything between me and Cathy. I held Bill's hand and finally nodded. Chapter 9. Friday night. Young men and women swayed freely on the dance floor, showcasing their wonderful moves. At a nearby booth, our group was celebrating our brother Harry's birthday. Noticing my distraction, he sat down beside me. I never would have thought that Cathy was such an infatuated woman. And I must admit, I was shocked to hear all this too. The usual laughter and jokes were absent as Harry's expression turned serious. In the past, I thought Cathy was just a pampered rich kid, indifferent to you. But now it seems that might not be the case. I looked up at Harry. He smirked and chuckled. A few years ago, Cathy came to see me. She looked especially worn out at that time. She seemed to have lost all her vitality and kept asking me about your whereabouts. At the time, I held a grudge and naturally refused to tell her. But looking back now, if I had told her then, she might not have attempted suicide. Harry sighed with guilt and downed his drink. I lowered my gaze. Feeling a tightness in my heart. I pursed my lips. I'll head back first. Have a good time, everyone. Before Harry could respond, Snow stood up first. I haven't been drinking tonight. Let me drive you home? I glanced at Harry, who shrugged innocently. Snow was our high school classmate, both mine and Harry's. Ever since I returned to the country, she has been pursuing me relentlessly. According to Harry, she had a secret crush on me since high school. However, I was quite oblivious back then and didn't notice Snow's feelings. No need to trouble yourself, I'll just take a taxi. I politely declined with a faint smile. But Snow insisted on giving me a ride. "You've been drinking, it's better not to take a taxi alone. I'll be passing by your house on my way back, it's no trouble at all." Looking at Snow, full of enthusiasm. Given the circumstances, I couldn't really refuse anymore. Chapter 10. My home is very close to the bar, just about 10 minutes away. The night was cool, and under the streetlights, there were only two silhouettes. I smiled at Snow and said, "Thank you for going through the trouble of driving me back so late." The sincerity in my eyes seemed to make Snow feel a bit embarrassed. She smiled and brushed her hair gently in front of her. "Don't mention it." As she spoke, she took a deep breath, appearing somewhat nervous. "Do you have any free time this weekend? I'd like to treat you to a meal." "I'm sorry, but I might have to work overtime this weekend." I looked at Snow with a tinge of apology. She seemed afraid of causing me any trouble and quickly found an excuse for me. "It's okay, you've just returned to the country, and I'm sure you're busy with work. If you have any free time, feel free to ask me out." I looked into Snow's eyes and said, "I'm really sorry, but I don't have those kinds of feelings right now. Perhaps you should look for someone else and not waste your time on me." I firmly rejected her, and Snow's smile froze on her face. In some ways, Cathy and I are both equally stubborn. I turned to leave but was stopped by Snow behind me. Her gaze was intense. "Lance, I will wait for the day when you finally agree to see me." It was as if she was afraid of receiving my rejection. In the next moment, Snow got in her car and drove away. It was only when the car disappeared into the night that I let out a sigh. Love truly is a tormenting thing. Even though I have rejected Snow multiple times, she still holds onto a sincere heart, hoping that one day she can change my mind. Unfortunately, being touched is not the same as love. I will never be able to reciprocate Snow's feelings. I straightened my coat and walked quickly towards the elevator. The elevator doors opened with a ding. The overwhelming smell of alcohol surrounded me. At that moment, Cathy was sitting disheveled in front of my door, her face full of despair. Even in such a disheveled state, this woman still exuded an air of nobility that was hard to ignore. And at her feet lay empty bottles of alcohol scattered on the ground. How much had she been drinking? My heart skipped a beat as we locked eyes in silence. This was the first time I had seen Cathy in such a pitiful state. Her lips pressed into a tight line, and after a long silence, she softly asked me, "Are you?" She didn't finish the second part of her question, choking on the words. Unconsciously, I clenched my hands, my fingertips turning pale. "Are you what?" She hesitated, struggling to say the words that were about to come out. "The woman who just dropped you off, are you two together?" Cathy looked weary, her eyes filled with a hint of sadness. So, was her drinking tonight because of this? Chapter 11. It's not what you think. I looked at Cathy, wanting to reach out and help her up. But she brushed my hand away, her eyes filled with a hint of resentment. After a moment, she gave a self-deprecating smile. "Lance, what am I to you, really?" With those words, she got up, kicked the soda can in front of her, and stumbled towards the elevator. Cathy disappeared just like that. She didn't even listen to my explanation. That night, I slept restlessly, dreaming about the past with Cathy. Memories appeared in my dreams like a slideshow. On my 21st birthday, Cathy prepared a surprise for me. It was the happiest birthday I had ever experienced in my life. Cathy put a watch on my wrist, promising to love only me in this lifetime. We embraced and kissed under the envious gazes of others. I've always had poor sleep quality, and Cathy would always wait for me to fall asleep first. Every night when I woke up from a nightmare, she would gently pat me and say, "Lance, it's okay. Don't be afraid, it's just a dream." During those countless nights abroad, God knows how much I longed for the scent of Cathy on her. But all I received in return was a cold bed. I admit, I am a coward. I dare not show strong affection in front of Cathy, afraid that she would look down on me because of it. I also cannot bear the thought of sharing her with another man. That's why I refused to return to my home country all those years. I was afraid of hearing the news of Cathy getting married. Chapter 12. When I woke up from the dream, the clock on the wall showed 2 a.m. I got up and poured a glass of water, but at that moment, my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. I pressed the answer button, and the environment on the other end sounded very noisy. A woman's voice on the phone sounded somewhat excited. "Brother-in-law, I'm glad you answered the call. Today, Cathy said she wanted to go drinking with a few of us sisters. Once she entered the private room, she started drinking recklessly, no matter how much we tried to stop her. We couldn't hold her back at all, and now she's completely drunk and out of it. I figured it must be because of you. Do you have time to come and pick up Cathy? My temples started pounding. I quickly asked for their location. When I arrived at the bar, Cathy's childhood friend May was standing at the door, waiting for me. Brother-in-law, you finally came. Cathy is still asleep. Was it you who called me just now? Yes, it was me. When I called, Cathy kept calling your name. I paused for a moment. May turned around, looking at me with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? I forced a pale smile and said, it's nothing. Chapter 13. As soon as I entered the private room, I saw Cathy sleeping soundly. Even in this state of intoxication, her sleeping posture was still so gentle. Her fair skin had a faint pink hue, even more endearing than when she was awake. I carried Cathy into the back seat of the car. As I turned to leave, May suddenly called out to me. Brother-in-law, I know it's presumptuous to address you like this given your current relationship. But Cathy allowed it. Besides you, we have never called anyone else like this. There were no pedestrians on the road at this time. In the quiet atmosphere, I leaned against the car, hands in my pockets. At that time, none of you ever asked for my name. I chuckled lightly. The fact that I was the canary Cathy raised had always bothered me. May could naturally sense it too. You misunderstood. Cathy didn't mean it that way at the time. She said you were young and had a thin face, and if we paid too much attention to you, it would only make you uncomfortable. Privately, we only recognize you as our brother-in-law, no one else. Cathy has had a tough time these past few years, and it's not convenient for us sisters to say. You can ask her yourself when she wakes up. I let out a long sigh of relief. Every time I was with Cathy's friends, they always took good care of me. Her friends never looked at me differently because of our different backgrounds. It turns out that Cathy had already smoothed things over for me behind the scenes. I chuckled self-deprecatingly. How many more things has this foolish Cathy kept from me? The 10-odd minutes of the car ride felt like a lifetime. When we arrived home, Cathy was already half awake from the alcohol. The elevator slowly ascended, and we both remained silent, understanding each other without words. Why did you buy the house across from my place? I asked her softly, breaking the existing calm. Cathy murmured, huh? And obediently confessed. I wanted to see more of you. I didn't say a word and took a step out of the elevator first. The path of staying at my place was no longer feasible, so Cathy obediently entered her own home's passcode. I was about to tell her to rest well. Suddenly, she mustered some strength and pulled me into the house. In the darkness, Cathy skillfully closed the door. She pressed me against the door and tiptoed to kiss me. The kiss, filled with the taste of alcohol, came crashing down like a storm. The whole action was done in one breath, without any hesitation. Cathy's kiss was filled with uncontrollable passion, and in a daze, I held her slender waist tightly. The woman turned on the switch at the entrance. In an instant, the room was brightly lit. Cathy leaned against my chest, her eyes flickering with the flames of love. I'm sorry for not listening to your explanation. I waited for you for hours tonight and saw that woman bringing you back. Overwhelmed with jealousy, I couldn't control myself. Her expression was like that of a child who had done something wrong, hoping for my forgiveness. How many years had it been since I last saw this shy, girlish expression on Cathy's face? I couldn't remember. My cheeks burned, feeling like my whole face was on fire. Patiently, I explained, no, she pursued me, but I didn't agree. Cathy chuckled lightly, I know. Her gaze gradually grew intense, and starlight flowed in her dark, ink-like eyes. Suddenly, I lifted Cathy up by her waist. In a husky voice, I whispered in her ear once again, Cathy, I can't hold back anymore. Chapter 14. The next morning, I woke up in Cathy's bed. I slipped on my slippers and walked out of the room, finding Cathy cooking porridge in the kitchen. When she saw me, she placed the steaming millet porridge on the table. Come, taste my cooking. I sat on a high stool, the aroma of the millet porridge tempting my taste buds. As I absent-mindedly stirred the spoon in the white porcelain bowl, my appetite was nowhere to be found. I looked at Cathy, who was still busy, and my gaze grew deeper. What happened to the wound on your wrist? As the words fell, Cathy's figure paused. She turned around, seemingly afraid to look at me. I walked up to her, wanting to hold her hand, but Cathy stopped me. Don't look, this scar is ugly. I didn't listen and still insisted on taking her hand. As my fingertips brushed over that scar, tears welled up in my eyes. Such a deep scar, I didn't even dare to think about its origin. If Bill hadn't happened to visit her at that time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. If Cathy had truly taken her own life because of me, then I would live the rest of my life in the shadow of guilt. Cathy gently wiped away my tears and said, "Why are you crying? Look, I'm fine, aren't I?" I held on to Cathy's hand and said, "How could you be so silly?" She let out a sigh and embraced my waist, saying, "During the 6 months when I couldn't find you, I hated you to the core. I hated why you provoked me and didn't want me. But later, I gradually understood. It must be because I wasn't good enough, that's why you left me. But believe me, from the day I started being with you, I made up my mind and vowed to marry you in this lifetime." The more gently Cathy explained, the more tears flowed from my eyes. These years have truly been difficult for her. She hurriedly wiped away my tears, her hands in a flurry of motion. Finally, she kissed my tears. "Lance, you truly are my downfall. Even though I've hated you in my heart all these years, I couldn't bear to see you suffer even a little. Even if it's just seeing you shed tears, it breaks my heart. Have I fallen into your hands in this lifetime, I admit, I was too stubborn back then. But some things still need to be clarified. There have been too many misunderstandings between me and Cathy." Chapter 15. I pulled Cathy over to the sofa and we sat down. At that time, when I was with you, I didn't feel secure inside. I was just a university student with nothing, while you were already successful in your career. I was afraid that in the eyes of others, I simply couldn't measure up to you. I didn't dare to share my happiness with you, and even more so, I didn't dare to share my sadness. Because I knew you were busy, I was worried about disturbing your work. In this relationship, I've always felt inferior. Your personality has always been reserved, which made me think that you were just playing around with me, treating me like a pet canary you kept. As I finished speaking, Cathy looked at me incredulously. Her tone was very firm as she said, "I have never thought that way." Seemingly understanding the miscommunication between us, Cathy seemed to have a sudden realization. "Lance, how did we have so many misunderstandings in our relationship?" Cathy leaned into my embrace and said, "Do you know why I like you?" I shook my head, and Cathy patiently explained it to me. "The first time I saw you was at the Jinding cemetery. You were wearing a clean white shirt, holding a bouquet of chrysanthemums. I happened to be visiting my deceased father at the cemetery that day, and it was raining heavily, soaking my clothes. As I passed by you, you handed me an umbrella. I asked what you would do, and you said your home was nearby. Later, as I watched you run in the rain, when I snapped out of my thoughts and went to look for you, I couldn't find you anymore." As she finished speaking, Cathy chuckled softly. "I had never seen a boy like you before, so kind-hearted that you would rather get wet in the rain than not offer your umbrella to someone in need. Later, I used my connections to find you and be with you. At that time, I thought we would get married after you graduated from university. But your personality was too independent. You didn't want to rely on my status. You weren't like other guys who wanted to be glued to me, wanting to spend every waking hour together. Actually, I have a strong possessiveness. When I saw you getting close to other women, I would feel jealous. When I saw you chatting happily with classmates, I even hated myself for not being a student, for not having common topics with you. So I had to pretend not to care, to respect all your decisions. It's because of this that you developed the misconception that I didn't love you, right?" Cathy's words were something I had never heard her say before. It turns out that she cares about me so much. At this point, everything is laid out on the table. Because of all this, I dare not show my love for you in front of you. I'm afraid of being looked down upon by you. A canary is not worthy of falling in love with its benefactor, and I dare not reveal my feelings in front of you, fearing that I will be the one hurt in the end. Cathy tenderly kissed the corner of my lips. "Fool, in this relationship, I am the one who feels inferior. I'm afraid that you think I have nothing except money. I even thought, even if you only love my money, at least I have something real. Unfortunately, what you value has never been these things." I felt a tremor in my heart. The one thing that has always bothered me was also revealed. Actually, the reason I left wasn't just because of all this. At that time, I thought Bill was your legitimate boyfriend. To this, Cathy was surprised. Lance, why have you never asked me about it? At that time, I was just accompanying my brother to attend a business banquet. We unraveled each and every detail of the past. I finally understood how deep the misunderstandings between Cathy and I were over the years. That day, Cathy lay in my arms and spoke a lot. Until she grew tired, she fell asleep leaning against me. I gently kissed her lips and carried her into the bedroom, tucking her in under the covers. Chapter 16. Since reconciling with Cathy, she can't get enough of being with me. She wants to take me everywhere, afraid that I might disappear again. I understand that deep down, she still fears me leaving her. The joy of regaining what was lost is something I can truly relate to. After intense happiness, the feeling of insecurity grows stronger. Even though I repeatedly assure Cathy that I won't leave her again. When we go to sleep at night, she subconsciously holds me tightly. As if she wants to embed me into her life. Bill, of course, is happy for us too. Seeing us standing together, he laughed and even shed tears of joy. A month later, I proposed to Cathy. In the villa prepared for our wedding, Cathy's best friend, Harry, was also present. The room was filled with red roses, every detail meticulously decorated. Cathy looked beautiful today, radiating brilliance. I knelt down on one knee, looking at her with deep affection. In my hand, I held the engagement ring she had asked me to design before. I have to admit, she was cunning, casting her line to catch a big fish ever since I returned to the country. I took a deep breath, suppressing the nervousness in my heart. Cathy, this is our 6th year together. But for a long 4 years in between, I wasn't by your side. The haze outside the window gradually dissipates, the light getting brighter, and you become clearer in front of me. It's just an ordinary day today. You woke up lying beside me this morning, finding comfort in my embrace. I realized that my gaze couldn't be taken away from you, and I couldn't bear to sleep because I was afraid that if I closed my eyes, you would disappear from my sight again. Perhaps you don't know that in the moments I've spent gazing at you, I've made a bold decision. I want to propose to you, even if time is pressing, even if it might startle you. This time, it's a genuine proposal. My girl, who has been persistent for so many years, now it's my turn to be brave. I want to take you home. And what about you? Are you willing to come home with me? From my perspective, Cathy's hands were trembling slightly. Everyone was cheering, "Marry him, marry him, marry him." Suddenly, I felt so lucky. All these years, Cathy has been waiting for me. Perhaps, in countless nights of tossing and turning in the future, I will still remember this moment of excitement. Cathy picked up the engagement ring and slipped it onto her ring finger. From now on, I'll be your wife. The surrounding cheers grew louder, but all I could see in Cathy's eyes was me. The moon outside the window shone silver, and I joyfully embraced her in my arms. Cathy cried and said, "I don't deserve this." She also said, "You are the best gift the world has given me." Cathy doesn't know that she is the gift bestowed upon me by the heavens. I've never told Cathy. Many years ago, on the day we met at the Jining cemetery, I had just lost my loved one. I sat quietly on the steps of the cemetery for a long time, until the sky gradually darkened. At that moment, Cathy passed by me, carrying a pleasant fragrance. Later, the weather changed slightly, and it started to drizzle in the cemetery. Cathy walked over to me and draped the black coat from the bodyguard's hand over me. "Your clothes are thin, don't catch a cold. It's getting late, go back quickly." Even though she was shivering from the cold herself, her gaze towards me was still warm. Perhaps Cathy will never understand. Her simple gesture brought me so much comfort at that time. I nodded and saw her wet clothes from the rain. I rummaged in my backpack and took out an umbrella for her. I never expected that such a simple act would be remembered by Cathy for so long. I bloomed amidst desperation, everyone wanted to pick me. Only Cathy passed by and held up an umbrella for me. She said, "Even if you bloom to your fullest, remember that I'm still here."